We all know the story, right? David and Goliath, a shepherd boy, a massive giant, one little stone. It's the underdog story to end all underdog stories. But what if we look a little closer? Beyond the legend, who was the giant at the heart of it all? Let's deconstruct this epic showdown and really get to know the man, the myth, and what the battle was truly about. I mean, we use the phrase David and Goliath all the time. You've probably said it yourself. We use it for any situation where we're up against a challenge that just seems impossible, where the odds are just totally stacked against us. It's the small versus the mighty, the weak versus the strong. But let's pause on the metaphor for a second. Who actually was Goliath? Where did this larger-than-life figure even come from? If we want to really understand the story, we've got to look past the legend and investigate the giant himself. And the first place to look isn't at Goliath, but at his people. See, he wasn't just some random monster who wandered onto a battlefield. He was the champion of a powerful and, frankly, terrifying nation, the Philistines. So who were these Philistines? Well, the Bible traces their family tree all the way back to Noah. Historians, on the other hand, often connect them to the mysterious sea peoples who caused all sorts of chaos back in the late Bronze Age. They came from around the Crete area, and here's the kicker. They had a massive tech advantage. They were masters of iron, which meant their weapons were way better than anything the Israelites had. So let's be clear, this wasn't just some friendly rivalry. The Philistines had better tech, and they consistently beat the Israelites in battle. This context is absolutely crucial, because it means Goliath wasn't just a big dude. He was the star player for an already scary, oppressive enemy. The threat was real, like really real. Okay, so we know his people were a force to be reckoned with. But now, let's get to the main event, the thing everyone talks about when it comes to Goliath, his incredible size. Just how tall are we talking here? The original text in 1 Samuel gives us a pretty specific measurement, 6 cubits and a span. Now, unless you're an ancient history expert, that probably doesn't mean a whole lot. A cubit was an old unit of measurement, about the length of a forearm. So what does that actually look like in feet and inches? Okay, you ready for this? When you do the math, depending on the exact standard for a cubit, you get a truly staggering number, 9 feet, 6 inches. Let that sink in for a second. Just try to picture standing in front of someone who is nearly 10 feet tall. And just for a little reality check, the tallest human being ever officially recorded in modern history was a man named Robert Wadlow. He stood at 8 feet, 11 inches tall. That means Goliath, as he's described, would have been over half a foot taller than the tallest person we have scientific proof of, ever. I mean, just look at this. You can see the sheer scale we're talking about. Here's your average guy, then the tallest man in modern history, and then there's Goliath. He's literally off the charts. He wouldn't just be tall. He'd be a figure of unimaginable, terrifying size. A size like that brings up a pretty obvious question, right? It's one thing to hear the number, but how do you even explain it? How is that possible? Where in the world could a man that big have come from? Well, to try and answer that, there are a few fascinating possibilities that get explored, ranging from the supernatural all the way to the historical, trying to make sense of a 9.5-foot-tall warrior. Okay, theory number 1 points to the Nephilim. You might remember them from the book of Genesis. They're described as the offspring of beings called the sons of God and human women. Some people interpret this to mean they were a kind of hybrid race of, well, giants. It's worth pointing out, though, that a lot of this thinking is influenced by texts outside the main biblical canon, so it's an idea to be approached with a bit of discernment. A second theory connects Goliath to the Anakim. This was another race of giants mentioned in the Old Testament, one that the Israelites had actually run into before. So the idea here is that maybe the Philistines, and Goliath specifically, were descendants from this known giant bloodline. And then there's a much simpler idea. We read about people in this era living for an incredibly long time, right? Think of Methuselah, who supposedly lived to be 969. So the argument is pretty straightforward. If their lifespans were so much longer than ours, maybe their potential for physical growth was just on a completely different scale too. But you know, whether his origins were supernatural or biological, the real power of the story isn't about how tall he was. The text makes it very clear that this showdown was never really just a physical fight. At its absolute core, it was a spiritual confrontation. Just look at the tale of the tape here. It's so stark. In one corner, you've got Goliath, He is decked out with the best military tech of the day, a sword, a spear, a javelin, the whole shebang. And he also brings open defiance against God. In the other corner, David. His physical weapons are kind of sad, honestly, a sling and a few rocks. But his real arsenal was his total, complete trust in God's power. And this is the moment the whole story pivots. David just lays it all on the line. He looks at this 9-foot-tall killing machine and says it loud and clear. Your weapons don't matter. My strength isn't in my arm, it's in the God you just insulted. This isn't my fight, it's his. And that's the whole point, isn't it? The story totally reframes the fight. It stops being about a shepherd boy versus a giant. It becomes a contest between human pride and arrogance, all of Goliath's weapons and bluster, and divine power, which is represented by David's unshakable faith. So that brings us to the big question. Why are we still talking about this story thousands of years later? It's not just a cool action sequence about an underdog win. The reason it endures is because of the incredibly profound lesson it teaches. When you really break it down, the takeaways are huge. It all starts with the idea that God's power can overcome any odds, no matter how impossible they look. It shows us that true victory isn't won by sword or spear, but that faith and the right perspective can be the ultimate weapons. And it all leads to this incredible conclusion. God can use the most unlikely people to show his enormous strength. If we boil it all down to one single universal truth, it's this. This is the idea that makes the story connect with everyone, no matter who you are. It's a powerful, timeless reminder that the giants in our own lives, those challenges that seem impossibly big, can actually be overcome. And that kind of leaves us with one last thought. The Philistine champion might be long gone, but the idea of a Goliath is still very much with us. So the real question the story asks each of us is this. What are the giants you face in your own life, and what weapons are you bringing to the fight?